The witnesses have not only been unusually cooperative, they've been unusually voluble. And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I do believe you set the record today with eliciting 22 minutes worth of answers under the 5-minute rule, and I hope I don't break that record myself. Mr. Chairman, I am not altogether sure that the witnesses got your message about this not being an impeachment hearing. By my count, they've used the word impeachment at least 30 times, and I think euphemisms amount to at least 3 times that many. Nevertheless, a lot of important subjects have been brought up. The first thing I want to do is to thank Professor Presser and Professor Rabkin. If you could move to a mic, I'm going to direct some questions towards you all in just a minute. I want to thank you all for making a big effort to be here today, which I know was at some personal inconvenience, but it's much appreciated as well. Mr. Presser, very quickly, Mr. Bugliosi seemed to have attacked you personally a while ago, and I didn't know if you wanted to respond or not.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I suppose it's not the right thing to do to relitigate the Clinton impeachment hearings, but Mr. Bugliosi said, I think twice, that they were all about lying about sex. They weren't. More than half of this House believed that they were about obstruction of justice and tampering with witnesses and doing other acts that seemed to suggest no regard to the President's obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That's what I thought the Clinton impeachment was all about, not lying about sex. But that's over now, and we can move on. Okay.
Professor Presser, let me ask a couple of other questions. First of all, have you heard any credible allegation today that you think amounts to any kind of an impeachable offense?
No.
A few minutes ago, you said that you thought the real problem was, or suggested that the real problem was just a difference of opinion, a difference of policy, and you thought that the same legitimate actions taken by this president had been taken by any other president. So I assume that you don't think there's any evidence of misconduct in this administration.
That's my view. I think the comments about what other presidents have done was probably from Professor Rabkin, but I think the answer to your question is still I haven't seen acts that would rise to the level of any impeachable offense.
Professor Rabkin, now that you're at a mic, you have regretted strongly the tone of the debate that surrounds this particular subject. If you look beneath the anger and the hatred and the bitterness, do you see any impeachable offenses? And sort of a secondary question, what accounts for that? That is the tone.
Let me start with the first question. Is there something impeachable? If people believed that the president knowingly, deliberately got us into a war for reasons completely unrelated to national security, and he did it, I don't know, to enrich oil companies, I really have not been able to understand what people were alluding to. They seem to be suggesting that the actual reasons for going into Iraq were so completely removed from national security that he wasn't just engaged in constructing an argument where someone might disagree with, but he was totally misrepresenting what were the real reasons. If that were true, of course that would be impeachable. You absolutely need to defend the country against a chief executive who would wantonly take the country into war for illicit purposes. Sure. But, I mean, nobody has tried really to explain what that conspiracy theory is. It is just alluded to. Now, to the second thing, which is why are people so bitter, which I think has something to do with why they find it even plausible that such a charge is worth investigating, which just, to me, seems so demented, really. I mean, you have to believe not only that the president is a Shakespearean villain, right? I mean, is Iago, just pure evil. You have to believe not only that, but you have to believe that all through the White House there are people saying, you know, I think I'll just cover it up. You know, I think I just won't let anyone know this. And that seems to me unbelievable. So I think if people are open to this, they must be extremely bitter. I mean, the people making these charges. And why is that? I just give you one thing that's worth reminding ourselves of, which is the country has been closely divided for a long time, and that tends to build up, you know, a sense of frustration and sometimes rage. And here we now seem to be the third election in a row which is going to be really, really close. I'm not criticizing anyone for that. I'm just reminding people, in a situation like that, tempers flare. People get a little bit overwrought, and I think some of what we've heard here today was just overwrought.
Mr. Chairman, I have one last question that I'd like to direct both to Professor Presser and to Professor Rabkin, and it is this. If we were to use the charges that we've heard today, the accusations that we've heard today, as a standard for an impeachable offense, what other presidents would also be guilty of impeachable offenses? Now, this would be a good question to ask in your classes, and allow at least an hour to respond, because it seems to me you have to start with the first president, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, all wartime presidents, including Abraham Lincoln and all the wartime presidents of the last century and so forth. But I'd like for you to take your time and tell me what presidents you feel the accusations today would apply to if they were credible accusations of impeachable offenses. And Professor Presser, start with you, and we'll end with Professor Rabkin.
I'm probably going to be a little briefer than you'd like. I mean, it strikes me we'd have to add Franklin Roosevelt to the list because there are allegations that he wanted to get us into World War II. There may be other presidents, but the point I think you made in your opening statement, and that is the House of Representatives has to be very, very careful when it comes to attempts to criminalize political decisions. And I think that's the real thing that you have to watch out for. And I think war is a matter of high politics, and I think the Constitution gives both the House and the President considerable discretion in these areas, and I think you have to tread with great care when you think about them.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Professor Rabkin.
Let me just give three examples that are worth reminding ourselves about. The Spanish-American War, President McKinley asked for a declaration of war on the grounds that the Spanish had blown up the battleship Maine. And we have discovered afterwards that actually they didn't blow up the battleship Maine. It was an accident. There was a faulty boiler. Did President McKinley know this? I don't believe so, but he didn't pause too closely to have a close investigation of this. Right? In the Second World War, President Roosevelt was really goading the Japanese. I mean, he imposed all of these restrictions on their access to oil. He was really goading them to attack. And then he didn't take precautions that the Chief of Naval Operations urged on him to move the fleet away from Hawaii where it would be exposed to attack. I do not believe he meant to have the fleet sunk, but it's good to remind people, I see Congressman Nadler smiling, a lot of Yeah, well, no, I mean, a lot of crazy people, you may know this, a lot of crazy people not in Manhattan, but elsewhere said Roosevelt deliberately betrayed the country. Now, I think that was crazy, but there was a certain plausible basis for saying this if you were prepared to believe that a president of the United States could behave in such an outrageous way, which I am not. But I'm just saying, if you take this standard of there's something on the surface that looks suspicious and it ended badly, and then say, aha, let's go. There are a lot of presidents you could ask questions about. Let me just give a third example quickly. Truman. Truman said, this is not just a dispute between North Korea and South Korea. This is obviously communist aggression. This was obviously planned in the Kremlin. And that was entirely plausible. He probably did believe it. We know now from records that we found, actually, no. I mean, North Korea did this on its own, and Stalin had to catch up with it. So we've had a number of presidents in important situations say things which turned out to be false, and a lot of people died. Sorry.
You put the Vietnam War era presidents.
Yeah, there's another example. A lot of representations by President Johnson which turned out to be not quite the way he represented them, which I'm not accusing him of deliberately deceiving the country, but you know, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, there are all kinds of disputes now about what actually happened there, and it doesn't seem to be exactly the way he represented it to Congress. So, yes, I think that's a very helpful question. Just all of us should remind ourselves that presidents have to act in a situation where often there is a great deal of uncertainty, and to construe everything in the worst possible light and then say someone has to be punished, let's start with the president. This makes it impossible for future presidents to think calmly about what they need to do on the basis of limited information.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Rabkin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.